Hello, welcome to another Insights from Experts series. This week, our topic is oXygen and Componize DITA CCMS produce educational content at Kaplan. This is a use case interview, and I'm pleased to have with us George Bina and Jean Kaplansky. Quick introduction. Kaplan is a leading provider of test preparation content and study materials, serving over 1 million students and thousands of clients and university partners. Jean Kaplansky is a senior manager of content strategy and operations at Kaplan. Welcome, Jean. Thanks for coming again.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Could you tell me just a little bit more about yourself and Kaplan?
Sure. So I work for the operational group of product integration or implementation and enablement, which means I'm a member of an operations team, and I'm in charge of content strategy and content operations, which basically means when it comes to Componize and all things oXygen, I'm the person who keeps the train running. And I have a small team of 3 people. My team is in India, so we can run 24/7, make sure those trains keep running 24/7.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much. And with us as well is George Bina from SyncroSoft. SyncroSoft is a member of the W3C, founded in 98. They were SyncroSoft was founded in 98. They provide excellent coverage of today's XML technologies. Their flagship product, oXygen Editor, is the reference XML editor. Ask anyone who does technical writing, and oXygen will be probably the second word that comes out of their mouth. It's a pleasure to welcome SyncroSoft Director, George Bina. Hi, welcome.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Yeah, just to say a few words, I'm also a founder of SyncroSoft, and it's my interest is usually to see, to be aware of the technology and see how we can leverage the functionality and help our users go to conferences and interact with our customers and potential users, understand their needs, and see how we can better support them in their work. So I'm interacting in a way between our users and our product development and trying to see innovative ways of using the technology and presenting at conferences on different ideas and taking users' feedback and implementing that into our product.
Excellent, thanks. And that's actually how we met, isn't it, George, at a DITA Europe conference? And that's been going on for ages. We see each other pretty much every year now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's get down into the meat of things. This is a use case. So what kind of content do you produce, Jean?
So Kaplan produces primarily test prep or licensure prep content. We are actually going out on a limb and using a curriculum for a bunch of different things, including pre-college, post-bachelor's, and post-grad school on into people's careers. And in addition to the curriculum that we have, we're starting to branch out in advising and in other places of the educational experience.
Excellent. And so how do you use oXygen with Componize to generate educational content?
So with oXygen and Componize, we actually have about 70% of our content is XHTML. About 20% of our content is actually DITA, and then we have 10% of our content in DocBook. All of it has MathML on top of it. So we use the Componize and oXygen XML web author combination as our CMS to house all of our different doc types, which is actually pretty unusual. We have 3 dedicated doc types. Most companies choose one. So we have our 3 doc types, and we have 90% of our content has been migrated to Componize Alfresco at this point. And we have the same people who are authoring in oXygen XML Web Author. And the content is, it can be test questions, it can be educational, conceptual, or referential content. It can be things like handbooks or textbooks. Just really depends on the discipline, the level, and what aspect of education the content is serving at that point in time. But I'd say by and large, we have thousands of test questions. We get them from the test producers as stuff for students to practice with. We make up our own. We have writers all over the world who write the questions for us. And they're pretty complex. So we have to have a good structured editor for that.
Excellent. And so, well, you mentioned document types. What are the document types that you actually edit?
So again, we have XHTML. So our content was originally in HTML5. And when we migrated it, I wanted to make sure that we had a true validating parser behind it, because my background is completely single source, multiple output, XML all the way. And which is actually a really good thing, because once we migrated the content, we found all the little anomalies in the HTML5 that we wouldn't have otherwise found without a validating parser. We also have the DITA content, and our DITA content has an entire team in India that is just doing production work on it, which is pushing it to the LMS and getting it out for retail purposes. That's primarily most of our business content. Most of our all of our healthcare, I should say, and a lot of our pre-college content and licensure content is in HTML. And we have about 10% of our content left that's in DocBook, and it's in old school DocBook, no less. It's in DocBook 4.0, and that DocBook has MathML. I don't think it was quite integrated yet. So we're pulling in MathML to the DocBook because it's all engineering content. And as I mentioned, because we're doing all of these hard sciences for licensure purposes, so medical, healthcare, you name it, we have to have the MathML component, and there's MathML everywhere. So on top of oXygen Web Author, we have Wireless Math Type, which used to be Design Sciences Math Flow at one point. And now we have the integrated math type editor, and that makes math a lot easier for many, many people.
Yeah. All right. And like you mentioned also, well, some of your writers use oXygen Web Author, and well, some of them use desktop editor. What are why use different versions?
So with authors all over the world, a lot of our authors aren't even Kaplan employees. They're actually professional people in their professional setting, nurses, doctors, you name it, researchers. We have these people who are writing questions, and they need a simplified interface in which to do so. Something that's pretty locked down and something that they can get from a web browser. And that works fine, because all we're asking them to do is literally write and edit. We're not asking them to do any kind of publishing. We're not asking them to do any kind of workflow or processing other than write their content or edit their content. Internally, however, we have teams that are, dedicated to DITA or dedicated to XHTML or DocBook, and those teams are using oXygen XML, either professional or enterprise desktop. We have some teams that are actually using oXygen XML author only, because that all they need to do are the things that they can do as an author. They don't need to be able to write XSLT or be able to configure an oXygen doc type framework. They just need to be able to write. So my team and the DITA production team and our DocBook production team all have desktop iterations of some version. We have multiple versions as well. So everybody's on 24 right now on OWA, which is the web author. And my team is on the leading edge of everything. So we are all running desktop 25, which makes us really happy. And we have a bunch of people who are still using like 22 and in between 22 and 24. And it's just a matter of which licenses are where. We have 2 license servers, and then we have a bunch of dedicated licenses as well. For instance, my team, we all have dedicated licenses. So.
Actually, that reminds where you mentioned, like, the different versions of oXygen. How easy was it to like roll out a new version? I know where I used to work, we always had to wait for ages. oXygen would release a new version of editor. I'm there like, I want to download it. And like, the information architects are like, it's not yet compatible with the CCMS. So how quickly does that occur with Componize?
Pretty quickly, but that's because I'm working really closely with Componize development and with Frank Shipley, the Componize CTO. So my background is when I worked as a consultant at Arbortext a long time ago, we always tried to build everything in the development version of the software. And the whole point was if we built it in the development version of the software, we could test it in the out in the wild version of the software and know that we had covered all our bases and that we had something that was going to survive an upgrade, basically. So I've taken that approach with what we're doing here and with my group, because they're doing things like working with XSLT scripts and working with frameworks. And then we have a direct say over what the whole oXygen and XML web author experience is. We are actually working with 25 for that very reason of being able to work with the most recent version, so that we can make sure that we're covering all the bases and that we have the ability to use the latest plugins and things like that. So it's a really small team, so we're not so dependent on like a large group migration. But even that is less of an issue for us because it's all part of a software as a service. And Componize has a plugin for Alfresco and a plugin for oXygen, and those things are kind of pretty much in lockstep. So Frank tells me, when we have the capability of moving to the next version, and I pretty much try to keep us moving along as quickly as possible, usually because we want that functionality. So.
All right. And then you also mentioned frameworks, and I'm going to bring you in on this as well, George. What are oXygen frameworks? Why? What?
Yeah. So while oXygen will work generically with any schema that you specify or a CSS file that you put in an XML document to provide the visual editing, we found that it's a real advantage to package all the functionality needed to support the specific XML vocabulary in what we call an oXygen framework. Or initially it was document type association, because we just associated a schema to an XML document. So to dynamically, when you open a DocBook, you get the DocBook schema. When you open a DITA, you get the DITA schema. But this extended in time to add also CSS files, to add also XML catalogs, to add custom actions that you can use for DITA or for DocBook. And so on and so on. Other configuration files, what elements are available, hints, different CSS style, alternate style. So depending on the type of users, they can choose, and so on and so on. And all these are packaged and can be shared easily via different mechanisms. So and more, you can. We provide a number of predefined document types for DITA, DocBook, XHTML, and other XML vocabularies. And we also have an extension mechanism. So you can just say you extend the DITA framework and provide an additional layer, maybe your own specific custom actions or specific descriptions, or integrate your style guide. So when the user will see a specific element, they can get a link or a small description how they are supposed to use that, and so on. So we found this like, you know, building everything with big bricks all the time, or having like a predefined module that you can just start on top of them instead of rebuilding everything from scratch all the time. So they are quite useful as a production tool and exchange, easily exchangeable and extensible.
All right. And like you're finding that's an advantage for you, Jean.
Yeah, they're portable too. I mean,
Yeah.
the thing about doing a framework for any doc type is that you have a user experience basically that you have bundled, and you can move that. So you can use it in your oXygen web environment, or you can use it on a desktop. You can set up teams so that they're having the same experience and they're using the same version of DITA or the same version of DocBook with the, you know, official style sheet that has been chosen by the team, and just various other pieces of functionality or customized functionality. One thing that we did customize is we have Componize using a customization to do tagging that fires off emails in the review portion of oXygen WebAuthor. And that was something that our previous authoring system didn't do. And it was something that our authors were really happy to have as a new feature for them. So that was a big, it was a customization effort, but at the same time, because we're doing it as software as a service, it's bundled in the framework, we can pretty much move that around where we need to.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Excellent. And well, you've got all your different content types, you've got your editors. Yeah. How do you publish all of this?
So our publishing, it's a single source, multiple platforms. So it's a pretty classic setup. We have, of course, we have retail print products, and believe it or not, in 2023, retail print products are where it's at for educational content, unless it's in an LMS. If it's in a learning management system, which is what an LMS is, then that pretty much trumps everything because that's what's in front of most users. So we publish to the LMS, and that's primarily our test questions. They go through an internal tool to create a learning experience, which is basically courseware with the connective content that holds the different quizzes and practice tests together. And externally, we use Typify for our retail PDFs, and we create EPUBs as well. And we use some EPUBs are created after the Typify process, and we have at least one of our doc types is actually has a completely separate process for creating EPUBs.
It's multiple pipelines that you're having to manage there.
Yeah, and there's a big Amazon relationship in there as well for the retail. So yeah, we have a lot of stuff going out the door, and it's all across the board. If it's educational, we probably have a book that covers it.
All right. And so what do you find the advantages of using Componize over any other CCMS?
Well, so Componize is different than the classic CCMS, and it's not locked down. So at one point, everybody had a choice of doc type or wrote their own doc type, and then we headed into the era of specification doc types, and for the longest time, DocBook was, you know, the king of the castle in that one. And then DITA came along and pretty much ate the world. Yeah, DITA is a really important document type because it's so flexible by design in its architecture. And one of the things that we needed to do when we knew we were migrating to Componize and Alfresco, and we wanted to have everybody in oXygen Web Author, which is, we knew that we could migrate the people. We knew that we couldn't just rip the rug out from under them and say, okay, you're all going to use DITA now, or you're all going to use XHTML now. And so I liken our entire platform to like a tropical fish tank. We have lots of different tropical fish in there, which would be our authoring community. And they're swimming around the major features of whatever doc type that they need to be working with. And the cool thing about Alfresco is content agnostic. You can pretty much put anything in Alfresco. It's similar to SharePoint in that respect. At the same time, it's a little bit different than the classic Documentum or Visant or XHTML type of content management system, or any of the software as a service content management systems that are like purely locked to DITA. We needed the flexibility to be able to work with our different doc types. And we knew that oXygen always had that flexibility. So that was kind of a no-brainer, frankly. So it was just a matter of what do we pair it with? What do we put oXygen Web Author on top of? And we've had this relationship with Componize going back about 10 years now. And while hardcore XML people may not like the whole SharePoint or, you can put anything in this repository concept, it actually works very well for us because it was flexible enough to support all of our different doc types as XML, which is very important. And to keep things like when we move things around, we have links and metadata are preserved, and we have XML validation running through the CCMS, and we can do it for 3 different doc types. That was not the original intent. Componize started working with DITA pretty much. That was what everybody wanted, so that's what they worked with. But they had the beginnings of a DocBook framework or DocBook implementation and XHTML implementation all along. So it was just a matter of going back and picking up those implementations and bringing them forward, along with the DITA implementation and our specialization in that DITA implementation. So it's the flexibility on both sides, the doc type flexibility, that we can get out of all the different oXygen XML editors and authors, plus the flexibility of being able to ingest any content that we need to into Alfresco. So we can ingest ancillary content in addition to our source content. So if we have PDFs we have to get out there that are part of the content as handouts, we can do that. If we have authors who just are not ready to be using oXygen Web Author and they still have to author in like Google Docs or Word, they will submit the documentation to us or their work to us in documents that we can then convert into XML for use in the system. So there's a lot of communication that goes back and forth between the authors and the editorial staff. And we try to keep that in the source content as much as possible on the XML side, but we're realistic about it too, since we have all of these people who are subject matter experts and not XML professionals. So
non-technical users like nurses and doctors are able
lots of non-technical users. When we run the gamut from having people who are like me, power users, on down to people who are like, okay, I don't know what this is, so I'm not going to touch the keyboard until somebody sits with me.
I suppose then permissions allows you to, manage who can do what to what.
Yeah, we also have permissions and access control lists in place to control who can see what at this point. we have it pretty locked down for our business verticals in our XHTML setup, less so in our DITA setup. The actual reason for that is it's a little bit of a legacy thing, which is our HTML people never actually shared content before. And our DITA people, when they set up the original repository, they set it up with the purposes of sharing content, and they wanted to have everything in like one big Componize site in Alfresco, so that they could, to facilitate sharing the content, reusing the content, because we have
searching for the content.
Well, yes, searching for the content as well. I mean, the thing is that the search is really powerful, and that is another thing that our users are really happy about, is the search capability in Componize and Alfresco. It's fast and it picks up absolutely everything. And searching doesn't necessarily prevent anybody from finding stuff that they wouldn't, it's not necessarily locked down to the permissions level that the regular, navigation is, but they still don't necessarily have read access only, or write access, I should say. They'll only have read access to the things that they shouldn't have write access to. So then it's just a matter of figuring out which thing is the right project at the right time. And that's a training matter. So.
And I suppose, like what you mentioned earlier on, like, you've got publication pipelines direct to your LMSs.
Yeah, we have pipelines, we have archives. So, when you search for a project by either a question ID or a QID, or even by a project, an entire project name, it could come up a couple of different times, but it'll come up in different contexts. It'll come up as source content, it'll come up as an archive, and it'll come up potentially as a publishing pipeline. So we have to train our users on which one is yours, and that would be the source content. So.
And then like advantages of using oXygen over other XML editors.
Completely in the customization and configuration. One of our document types, our XHTML document type, is coming from an environment where, because we had so many different people who were subject matter experts and not XML experts, they were very, very concerned about their user experience going into a new authoring environment. And oXygen was flexible enough that we could write a framework that in some respects duplicated some of the behavior of their original authoring platform. And for our DITA team, we can, use a really simplified, cut down framework so they only see what they need to see and nothing more. And in DocBook land, we can certainly make the framework provide a UI that uses colors to indicate different kinds of headings and different kinds of fonts for different kinds of elements based on whether they're like, code or commands or menu GUI type of things. And all of it supports the MathML on top of it. So these are the important things to us, is that we have that flexibility of providing the user experience that is needed by the different business lines and the different product lines in those business lines. And oXygen is state of the art in terms of being the authoring platform that can do that.
Okay, I'll bring George in on this.
I would like to, I would like to just add a couple of things here that I think are, in my opinion, very important. One is on the validation side, there are different schema languages, but oXygen supports Schematron, which has the major advantage that the error messages are controlled by you, by the person that creates the schema. So you can basically communicate with your users in this way. And more, on top of that, we also have what is called quick-fixes. So not only that you can tell the user, there's this can be done differently in a better way, or this is an error, but you can also provide an automatic correction. So like for spell checking, imagine that somebody will tell this is wrong, this word is wrong, without giving you any suggestion. It will be difficult. But with quick fixes, you can provide one or more solutions that users can just choose from and fix the problem automatically. And that works in many cases. So that's, I think, one of the really important things in terms of user experience. And the other is the fact that we also are able to bring within the document itself custom actions. Your own custom actions can be placed within the document itself, and also prompts like hints, what we are supposed to do at this step and so on, which can be made visible or hidden based on the CSS that you are using or on some specific conditions. And that also helps because the user can just follow the document stream and see at some point an action that they can click to maybe expand the document with a new template, or that they just need to fill in and so on. So that, I think, it helps a lot with the what you mentioned, to bringing users that do not need training in advance because they can just follow the document structure and what's inside the document to obtain the actual content.
And that's actually a really good point, because we use I just remember back in the days when Arbortext had an error, it would throw its speed up in the air and you'd get a segfault 1514 or 1415 or something like that, and that was the only error message you got, which wasn't exactly actionable or meaningful. But it was definitely an error message. One of the very good things about oXygen is error detection and the collection of the error messages, that you can click through a list of the things that are at causing validation errors, and the list is written out in actionable, like, this is what is wrong descriptions, and it can, in some cases, will tell you exactly what you need to do to fix a problem. So rare and so very important. That's really what makes working with oXygen Desktop a pleasure, because you can have that entire list of everything that's wrong with that document. You can save it. You can, have it around for later, and you can click through it. And it really is a huge time saver when you're dealing with a large body of content where it's not quite right, or it got converted, or it has, in some cases, like this content is engineering content, and it started out as HTML content or some GML content back in the 70s, and it's gone through every single type of character mapping since. And it still has every type of character mapping. Knowing how to, where and what we need to do with character mapping to get everything into modern Unicode is, we weren't able to do that 25 years ago. We can do that now.
Right. Oh, we're sort of like, coming towards the end of this use case interview. Let me just recap, like, some of what we've talked about. We've talked about the benefits of using oXygen with Componize CCMS, so integration with oXygen Web Authors, just a click away. You've got direct access to the Alfresco Componize repository from oXygen Desktop. Metadata management, we didn't really go very deep into that, and I'll let you come back on that in a minute, but you're able to manage your metadata for the content, for the to actually inject inside of XML files, or also to tag the containers. You've got taxonomy management. You mentioned the excellent search engine, and ability to link external documents to and from oXygen Web Author. Let's round that all off, with these benefits, and I'll get both of you to come in on that.
So I mean, overall, the benefits of the things that we can do, adding the metadata, we can script in metadata. We generally are doing metadata in a more scripted and automated way, which is the safest way to do metadata in terms of, because, you know, when people start making up metadata and they use dashes and underscores, or they use them interchangeably but not consistently, that can create a real mess. And the more we can automate on that, the better off we are. And the fact that Componize is tracking that in the CMS means that it's always up to date no matter where we move the content in the CMS, and that it's always the correct metadata for that particular piece of content. Quite a bit of our metadata is actually locked down in oXygen WebAuthor environment. We have it as a read-only section so that the author can see the context and what the metadata is from their end, but they can't change certain aspects of it that are specific to our LMS and drive the LMS, because that's really important stuff to not break. But when it comes to like taxonomy and things like that, even that we will more likely script in as needed on a question ID by question ID basis. And we do have taxonomies. We do have all the usual metadata things of a large education content company. But managing that metadata is something that each of the business lines does separately. And so we just have to keep it all straight. And these are the tools that help us do that.
All right. George, a little final recap from you.
Well, yeah, we are glad that we see our technology leveraged by our partners like Componize to build an actual solution that basically solves the end user needs and provides this integrated experience and allows them to collaborate with people that contribute to content, to people that manage the content, and it's great to have this partnership that is in this way our end users benefit of a larger solution, let's say, that solves more of their needs.
Scalability, flexibility, adaptability, those are all words that we can use for both companies, and Kaplan's really taking good advantage of those qualities.
Yeah, well, we're just getting started. We just completed a huge migration. We have 90% of our groups are in Componize and Alfresco using OWA at this point. And we are, well, it's going to be an adventure to see where we go next.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Maybe we can plan something for next year and, like, you know, see 1 year on from today where you got to.
I have to finish writing up my tropical fish tank analogy for Balasage XML first. But yeah, that'll make for an interesting Balasage paper. But yes, you know, oXygen has been around. I think I've had a license since like 2006 or something like that. And I keep paying my S&P every year because I know I'm going to be using it no matter what. So it's been a really important part of the landscape for a long time. And it came along at just the point when we needed something to replace what was missing, which was we used to have tools like Arbortext and XMetal, and those are not part of the landscape anymore. oXygen has taken over that space, and you can make an analogy about oxygen in the room. There's plenty of it, and we are happy for it.
Excellent, making you grow.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, well, thank you very much, both of you. Thanks for agreeing to do this. I know we've done quite a few, Jean, haven't we? And you know, I'm still going around talking to more and more experts. I do like doing this part of my job, you know, meeting and talking with people. course, you know, learning more from that as well. You know, I learned quite a lot from speaking with my different interviewees. Thanks, George, for agreeing to do this with us. And well,
thank you. Thanks, Jean.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Forward to seeing you